There's something profoundly telling when someone says, I don't need a man. It might sound empowering on the surface, right? Bold, confident, self-sufficient. But if you really listen, it's not confident speaking. It's often a wall, a defense mechanism, a shield crafted out of past disappointments, maybe even pain, and certainly a deep mistrust. Because the truth is, we all need people. We need connection. We need partnership. Not because we're weak without it, but because we're wired for it. That's the human condition. So when a woman says, I don't need a man, what she's often really saying is, I've been hurt, or I'm not willing to risk vulnerability again. And while that's understandable, pain leaves scars. It becomes dangerous when that scar hardens into bitterness, when it becomes an identity, when the very idea of needing anyone becomes a source of shame or disdain. And in that space, love doesn't grow. Intimacy can't breathe there because love requires need, not desperation, not dependence, but a willingness to say, I choose to let you matter to me. I choose to let you in. If you find yourself with someone who treats needing you like it's a weakness or worse, like it's beneath them, you need to take that seriously. That's not independence. That's a rejection of mutuality. And in a relationship, that mutuality is everything. It's the willingness to lean on each other when things get hard, to be each other's sanctuary when the world outside is cold and unforgiving. But if one person sees needing the other as a threat to their power, that partnership is already fractured before it even begins. Now, I'm not suggesting you should want someone who's needy in the dysfunctional sense, someone who can't function without you, who collapses in your absence, who treats your attention like oxygen. That's not healthy either. But the opposite extreme is just as broken, a woman who wears her independence like armor, who is quick to tell you that you're replaceable, that she can do it all alone. That's not strength. That's fear in disguise. And fear is no foundation for something as delicate and vital as love. People say things like this to signal their boundaries. But sometimes what they're really doing is erecting walls so high that nobody ever gets in. That kind of woman might demand your loyalty, your time, your resources, but will never need you in the way that matters most. And when you're not needed, not truly let in, you become an accessory, a utility, disposable, the moment you cease to be useful or entertaining. And here's the thing. If you stay thinking you'll win her over, thinking you'll break down her walls and show her that you're different, you're going to exhaust yourself. You'll find yourself jumping through hoops just to earn the kind of emotional closeness that should come naturally in a real relationship. And in the end, you'll walk away wondering why you felt alone the whole time. So, if a woman tells you flat out that she doesn't need a man, listen. Don't argue. Don't try to convince her otherwise. Just take it for what it is, a warning, a clear sign that she's not ready to meet you halfway. And if that's the case, the most respectful, most powerful, and most loving thing you can do for both of you is to walk away. When a woman tells you, my ex was crazy, you need to pay attention not to the story necessarily, but to how she tells it. Now, sure, some people are difficult. Relationships can be messy, no one's denying that. But if every story she tells about her past relationships puts her squarely in the role of the helpless victim and paints every former partner as deranged, abusive, or unstable, well, that's not just a red flag. It's a pattern. And patterns speak louder than anecdotes. You see, relationships don't just happen to us. We participate in them, we shape them, we influence them. And sometimes we break them intentionally or not. So when someone refuses to acknowledge any part they may have played in the collapse of a relationship, what they are really showing you is a profound lack of self-awareness, maybe even a fear of it. Because if everything that's ever gone wrong in their past is someone else's fault, then they never have to confront the possibility that they themselves might need to change. That's not a partner, that's a powder cake. Because relationships thrive on accountability. They require people who are willing to look in the mirror and say, I could have done better, or here's what I learned from that. Without that humility, without that capacity for growth, conflict turns into blame, and blame turns into bitterness, and bitterness, that's a poison. Slow, corrosive, and devastating to anything good. Now, let me be clear. This isn't about shaming someone for being hurt or for having gone through a toxic relationship. People do go through hell, and sometimes they survive things that leave real scars. But there's a difference between surviving something and being defined by it. If she talks about her ex with venom in her voice and pride in her righteousness, if she speaks like someone who's frozen in a narrative where she's always the hero and everyone else is the villain. And you need to ask yourself, how long before you become the next villain in that story? Because it happens fast. One disagreement, one misstep, one moment where you forget something or say the wrong thing, and suddenly you're not the caring partner trying to solve a problem. You're just like the rest. And that's the trap. You'll find yourself walking on eggshells, trying to avoid triggering the ghosts of past relationships you had nothing to do with. You'll bend over backwards to prove you're different. Now, the more you do that, the less you'll recognize yourself, the more you'll disappear. And even worse, if you buy into that story she tells that she's always been the victim, you may unconsciously step into the role of rescuer. You'll feel responsible for healing her, for fixing what others broke. But that's not love. That's codependence dressed up as chivalry. And it never ends well, because you can't build a future with someone who's still living in their past. People who are ready for healthy relationships talk about their past with honesty and nuance. They acknowledge their pain, yes, but they also take ownership. They can say, here's what I learned and here's what I want to do differently. That's maturity. That's the kind of foundation a strong relationship is built on. But someone who's still at war with their history will eventually bring that war into your life. And if you're not careful, you'll become collateral damage in a battle you never signed up for. So if all her stories end with the same villain, and she never once questions her own role, take that seriously. Don't explain it away. Don't convince yourself you'll be the exception. Just understand what it means and walk away. When a woman says, I deserve the best no matter what, it sounds assertive, strong even. And in today's world, that kind of language is celebrated. But there's something lurking underneath a statement like that, something you'd be foolish not to examine closely. Because on the surface, it sounds like high standards. But dig a little deeper and you often find entitlement. Pure, unearned entitlement. You have to ask yourself, what does she mean by the best? Is it rooted in values, kindness, loyalty, shared purpose? Or is it about what she gets from the relationship, the lifestyle, the attention, the status? See, if the best is defined by what you do for her and never by who you are to her, you're not being loved, you're being measured. And once you're being measured, you're being replaced. Because the minute someone else comes along with the more to offer, at least by her definition, you're done. That's not love, that's a transaction. And no healthy relationship is transactional at its core. The problem is that this mindset has been dressed up as empowerment when really it's a way of avoiding reciprocity. That's narcissism cloaked in self-worth. And here's the trap you might fall into. You'll hear that kind of talk and feel challenged. You'll think, maybe I need to rise to the occasion. Maybe if I just work harder, earn more, give more, then I'll be worthy. But that's the beginning of your undoing. Because once you start playing that game, once you start trying to earn basic appreciation or affection, you've already lost. Because it means your worth in the relationship isn't intrinsic. It's conditional based on what you can provide, what image you can maintain, what expectations you can fulfill. And if that's the dynamic, then it's not love you're receiving. It's performance-based approval. And performance never satisfies the soul. This kind of woman will constantly assess whether you're measuring up. She'll expect you to be everything at once. The protector, the provider, the therapist, the planner, the emotional sponge. And if you falter even slightly, if you're tired one day, if your focus slips, if life hits you hard, she'll look at you with that cold distance like you've broken a contract you never agreed to. And in her mind, you did because she told you from the start she deserves the best. You must be very careful with people who frame love as something they're owed, not something they share. Love is not a debt to be collected. It's a voluntary offering. It's about two people saying, let's give to each other, let's grow together, let's suffer well together when life inevitably gets hot. But if you're the only one giving, if the burden always falls on your shoulders, and if the reward is her barely met expectations, you're in a trap disguised as a row. A healthy relationship is built on mutual recognition. I see you, I value you, not because of what you do for me, but because of who you are. That kind of love doesn't come from someone who demands the best without asking what they offer in return. It comes from someone who shows up, who gives as much as they take, who knows that love is not a right, it's a responsibility. So when you hear, I deserve the best no matter what, and there's no humility behind it, no balance, no sign of shared effort. Understand exactly what that means and walk away. When a woman says, "You should just know what I want," it might seem like a small thing, maybe even flattering at first. Like she believes the connection is so deep, so intuitive that words aren't necessary. But that's not what's really happening. That kind of thinking isn't romantic. It's immature. It's emotional laziness dressed up as intensity. Because what she's really saying is, I don't want to do the work of communicating. I want you to carry the burden of guessing. Now think about what that actually means. It means you're being put in a situation where you're expected to read her mind, anticipate her needs, and respond correctly every time, all without any real information. And when you inevitably get it wrong, the punishment is frustration, withdrawal, maybe even contempt. It's a setup, and it's not fair. Because no matter how much you care, no matter how in tune you are, you're not a psychic. And love doesn't thrive in the shadows of assumption, it thrives in clarity. What she's asking for isn't connection, it's control. If she refuses to say what she wants, but expects you to act on it anyway, she's not trying to build a relationship based on understanding, she's testing you. And that test never ends. Every miscue, every misstep becomes evidence not just of a mistake, but of your failure to care. It's the emotional game being played, and it's incredibly corrosive over time. People who value healthy relationships don't punish you for not knowing. They help you understand, they communicate, they take responsibility for their own needs, and they express them in a way that invites connection rather than demanding it. That's how trust is built. That's how two people become a team. But when one person holds all the emotional expectations and gives none of the guidance, the relationship becomes a maze with no. And the harder you try to find your way through it, the more lost you become over time. And what starts as occasional confusion turns into anxiety. You begin to second-guess everything. You walk on eggshells, hyper-aware of every glance, every silence, trying to interpret hidden meanings behind casual words. That's not love. It's emotional landmines. And eventually, the pressure to be perfect in your guesses becomes overwhelming. And when you break under it, because you will, you'll be accused of not being emotionally attuned, not caring enough, not trying hard enough. But it was never about effort. It was about control disguised as romantic idealism. Here's the deeper issue. This mindset doesn't just stay in the small things. It bleeds into everything. If she expects you to guess her feelings, she'll expect you to guess when she's upset, when she's insecure, when she's drifting, and when you don't catch it. Because again, you're not a mind reader. She'll see that as betrayal, as neglect. That's how resentment builds slowly, silently, but relentlessly. And if you stay, if you convince yourself that this is just part of being close, part of being in tune with your partner, you'll slowly lose yourself. You'll spend more energy managing her unspoken expectations than you do actually connecting. And connection is the entire point. But in relationships like that, the connection becomes conditional, dependent on your ability to pass these invisible emotional tests that never end and never come with instructions. Love is not about knowing everything without being told. It's about wanting to know and being with someone who's willing to help you understand. So when a woman tells you, you should just know, and she refuses to communicate with maturity, clarity, and care, don't confuse that for depth or passion. It's not. It's dysfunction. And the wisest thing you can do in that moment is walk away. When a woman says, men are all the same, you need to stop and really hear what's being said. Not just the words, but the mindset underneath. Because that's not just frustration talking. That's a worldview. That's a belief system built on resentment and reinforced by selective smallest ways. But without that, there's no intimacy, no trust, no shared.